What happens when the world loses confidence in the supply of oil? Well, we're watching it right now.
Now, this is going to be relatively off the cuff, but given the need for speed, I didn't think this one could wait for the weekend. As anyone who hasn't been living under a rock has seen and may or may not be shitting themselves over, Australia's running pretty low on fuel. Prices are spiking, some petrol stations are rationing already, or even closing already. Farmers can't start their machinery, fishing boats are stuck in port, and fuel transport companies are being turned away at the gate. After a conversation with my lovely wife, it occurred to me that many people may not understand why. Be it that it's something that they've just never paid attention to, maybe economics and trade just aren't their thing, or God forbid, maybe they're just willing to sit and blindly listen to the doublespeak that certain politicians are spewing. To those ladies and gentlemen, I say buckle up, because thanks to the egos of our politicians, if you think the price of petrol is going to be the only thing skyrocketing, you probably need to think again. Australia is grappling with a sharp escalation in petrol and diesel prices, in some cases jumping by 20 to 50 cents per litre overnight. Driven primarily by the geopolitical turmoil in the Middle East, where the US and Israel conflict with Iran has led to the effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz, which I really hope I've pronounced correctly, which is a critical choke point for global oil shipments. This disruption has halted nearly all crude oil exports from the region, causing international benchmark prices to surge initially to around 120 US per barrel before coming back to about $90 amid hopes of de-escalation. Australia, which imports approximately 80 to 90% of its refined fuels from overseas refineries in places like Singapore, South Korea and Japan, has felt the ripple effects almost immediately, with average retail prices in major cities climbing pretty rapidly. Motorists, for instance, were facing hikes of 25 to 50 cents per litre in just days, which pushed 91% unleaded to $2.19 at more than half of the stations, with the national average being $1.98 for petrol and $1.96 for diesel as at the time of recording. Some spots have even surged past $2.50 amid daily hikes. And unfortunately, if you're one of those people with a fancy car that requires 95 to 98%, I wish you the best of luck, because I don't see the national average staying below $2 beyond tomorrow. Some places that I've seen in Melbourne were already pushing $2.90 a litre.
Shit, it cost me $90 the other day just to get to work. We're already in a cost of living crunch. This is going to break people.
Looking back, our vulnerability started with long-term policy decisions from both sides of the political aisle that have reduced our domestic refining capacity from 12 facilities decades ago to just 2 today, both of which are reliant on government support in order to continue to operate. Successive administrations have allowed closures without intervention, opting for cheaper imports that now expose the country to global volatility.
Here we are, a nation that's floating on natural resources, exporting energy like it's going out of style, yet we can't even keep our own tanks full without begging from overseas. Why is it that as a country, our ability to be self-sufficient has been chipped away at? Someone's getting rich off of this shit, that's for sure.
In my opinion, this is what happens when you let green dreams and globalist policies close refineries. We've gone from 12 to 2, all in the name of cheaper imports, and both major parties are responsible for that, pushing us towards importing resources that we already have an abundance of. Now those imports are biting us in the arse, with prices surging before the oil shock even fully lands. And I will not be surprised if this gets used as a big stick example of why Australia should go 100% renewable, which in my opinion is an absolute pipe dream. The technology just simply is not there yet, and even if it was, 70 to 80% of the solar and wind farms are either partly or wholly owned by foreign interests.
Fucking bite me. Australia is one of the most resource-plenty countries in the world. There is absolutely no reason for us to be in this position. There have been successive governments that have failed this country, and don't get me started on the morons wanting to turn farmland into shiny solar farms. And don't forget to hit that like button. And if you're on mobile, give us a hype. It's like a super like that if we get enough, we get in the top 100 videos of the day, and it takes surprisingly little to get up there in the Aussie market.
The rapid increase in petrol prices has sparked accusations of price gouging by retailers, who are alleged to have exploited the conflict as a pretext to inflate their margins before the full impact of the higher wholesale costs hits them, despite typical lags of 7 to 10 days for global oil spikes to translate to local pumps. I mean, basically, it's that they're trying to pull in as much profit now so that they have a buffer when the pain starts on them. Regional petrol stations have resorted to rationing, some even imposing limits like $20 per customer to prioritise locals and emergency services, as well as essential workers such as farmers and truckers. In other regions, station owners have stockpiled reserves for state emergency services and the fire brigades, stretching supplies to last up to 15 days while waiting on halted deliveries from suppliers who are facing their own shortages.
Literally, our farmers have nothing left in the tanks on their properties, which means they can't run their tractors, they can't go and produce your food and fibre.
Farmers have reported being cut off from bulk diesel, forcing them to buy at inflated retail prices despite already being stretched pretty thin. This has raised fears of broader economic fallout, including the collapse of regional property values if farmers who are already stretched thin are forced to sell up, let alone the higher food prices as agricultural operations struggle with fuel access during the critical seasons.
Food prices in particular are something that is going to be hit here, not just because of the increasing price of oil, but the increasing price of fertiliser.
Transport companies, the ones that keep our shelves stocked, are also reeling, with depots unable to secure the usual volumes, which could cascade into additional costs for goods nationwide. Government officials, led by Energy Minister Chris Bowen, have repeatedly tried to convince the public that the national fuel supplies remain secure, emphasising that the issues stem from demand spikes rather than the actual supply interruptions.
Every single expected delivery of petrol, diesel and jet fuel has arrived on time, on schedule, as expected. There's absolutely no reason for panic anything. Panicking, full stop, panic buying or panic anything.
We don't have to worry about panic buying. There is no fuel for the retailers to get from the wholesalers of the petrol.
Bowen stated that no shipments have been interrupted and that shortages are solely due to panic buying, with plenty of fuel available if demand normalises. To me, these people are just delusional at this point as far as I'm concerned.
That's right, people. Screw the fact that they've made us reliant on overseas resources, screw the fact that the economy's been made to be a house of cards, and screw the fact that people are rightfully scared about how they'll get to work and keep a roof over their heads as well as food on the table. No, you are the reason that we're running out of petrol. If Bowen's so confident, I'll bet him a tank of petrol that will hit $4 a litre in a major area somewhere across the country before Easter.
Also, this is going to last for quite a while. So panic buying this week isn't going to solve the problem, because you're still going to have the problem the next week and the next week and the next week. Or actually, you've got a couple of months ahead of this sort of problem.
Previously, Australia supposedly held 36 days of petrol, 34 days of diesel and 32 days of jet fuel in reserve, the highest levels in over a decade. They seem to be really proud of that, but I don't know why.
And how much diesel in days do we currently have in store on Australian soil?
Call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for the question. The answer to the question is 34 days in relation to diesel, 32 days in relation to jet fuel and 36 days in relation to petrol.
The problem with Australia's fuel supply is we generally only have about 4 or 5 weeks of fuel ever. It's just one of those things. You've got the stats there on the numbers. Actually, it's probably the ones from the minister. I'd say our diesel fuel is actually probably lower than that.
Yeah.
I'd probably put around 30 days worth of supply. The vast majority of Australia's fuel comes in, shipped in via Singapore.
We've basically been living paycheck to paycheck on our fuel reserves. 4 to 5 weeks if everything goes to hell, which is really not good, particularly from an international perspective.
This is the kind of scenario that's been war gamed since the 1970s.
Australia signed a treaty in the 70s with 29 other countries to guarantee that we'd have 90 days of reserve. As part of that treaty, we agree to release some of the reserves if a collective action comes along. Basically, we agree to share with other treaty members if something goes south for them. The most recent example of this is in March and April of 22, when we released our reserves in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Not that that's an excuse, because as of November last year, Australia is the only treaty member to have less than 90 days. Most have 110 days plus. We have less than half that.
And yet here we are in the midst of a transportation meltdown because something's happened a million miles away.
But even prior to 2022, Australia had not held 90 days worth of resources since about March of 2012. And yes, while it started under Labor in 2012, the coalition had a decade to fix it, and Labor have now also had another 4 years too. Neither major party did anything significant to fix this problem, and I honestly don't care for the political point scoring at this point. If people aren't already hurting over this, they will soon be.
A national crisis is a time for leadership.
I quote, a national crisis on fuel supply. Yep. Prime Minister, is the Minister correct?
They come in these speech books and say, is there a crisis? There is a war in the Middle East.
When isn't there a war in the Middle East, you pompous blowhard? The last I checked, you're paid to protect the interests of the people of Australia.
I've no interest in hearing what government fat cats on hundreds of thousands of dollars per year with travel privileges has to say, except how they plan on fixing this.
Actually, that's a good point. We didn't look into whether or not the rations are being set aside for Parliament members since they travel from all across the country to bitch and moan and call each other names. That might be good to look into.
But I mean, what is the way out of this? In the short term, there isn't much of one for those of us just trying to get by. We can try and limit travel, buy cheaper brands of groceries to keep the costs down, but there's not much else that we can do about that. And a lot of us were already doing that in this cost of living crisis that we're experiencing. There's a lot of people that have been living beyond their means that are going to get hit hard. The price of everyday items is going to go up eventually.
Easy. Remember, there's plenty of people smarter than you that were getting called alarmist or conspiratorial for joining the dots on how this will affect people down the track.
The short-term knee-jerk policy change would be to go back and cut the fuel excise, even temporarily in my opinion. At current, it's about 52 cents per litre that you pay at the pump that's going to the federal government that is a tax on petrol that's supposed to go towards maintaining roads. Anyone that's driven on a number of the major highways would know that the money is not necessarily going to that. Also, GST is then taxed on top of that. A temporary reduction like the one in 2022 could help everyday Aussies in the short term, but doing that for 6 months costs the government an estimated $3 billion in revenue. Given the shit that they insist on wasting our tax dollars on, I don't think they're likely to give up those kinds of amounts again. And if they have a $3 billion hole in the budget, either they print money without an increase in economic output and risk inflation, or they hold everyday Aussies up by the ankles and they shake to see what falls out. Either way, poor financial strategy and planning by both sides could tank what's left of the economy. Well, I sure as shit got the knee-jerk reaction wrong. As it turns out, all the greenwashing that the Labor government's been doing goes out the window, apparently, when they're looking at a political black eye. It's a couple of days after I originally recorded this video, and unfortunately with the editing taking so long, I didn't quite get it out in time. But in the interim, there's been a couple of extra things that have happened, so I figured I'd just insert this anyway. The main thing is that on March 12th, instead of messing with the tax system to give Aussies a break at the pump, the Albanese government decided to announce a 60-day temporary relaxation of the fuel quality standards under the Fuel Quality Standards Act.
Temporarily suspending Australia's fuel standards, releasing 100 million litres of lower standard fuel a month for 2 months, redirected from exports, blended into domestic supplies and sent to service stations.
They're bumping up the amount of allowed sulphur in petrol to 50 parts per million from our previously ultra-low 10 parts per million that we've had since last year, all to keep an extra 100 million litres a month in the domestic supply instead of exporting it to countries that have laxer rules. Bowen's called it a practical action to help farmers and regional Australians through the crunch, directing the fuel to short supply areas and independence. In my opinion, it's a bit of a desperate but understandable patch job. It's better than empty pumps, but let's be real about the trade-offs. In the short term, this will likely ease the regional diesel crisis, stop some of the rationing, and maybe even nudge the prices down a bit by flooding the market with more volume. Modern cars should be able to handle the slight sulphur bump without major issues, and it's still cleaner than a lot of the global fuels that are out there. But long term, even this isn't really a solution. 100 million litres per month sounds like a lot, but it basically equates to an extra week's worth of fuel for Australia. And Bowen said that it's for 60 days, but they are open to extending it for longer periods. I mean, the whole point of bringing the sulphur levels down was for health reasons. So there's a bit of a trade-off there. But all in all, this just really screams how fragile our import-dependent setup really is. In the long term, we need to be refining our own resources and not be reliant on overseas imports. The people that are against nuclear probably need to get their heads out of their asses so that we can use that along with green and renewable energy and current resources as a manner of energy production, particularly with the population increasing at the rate that the feds have been allowing. It's all well and good to be concerned about climate change or whatever else keeps you up at night, but until the infrastructure is in place, not that I personally think it ever will be, we cannot be reliant on overseas imports or green energy in order to keep the lights on. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, the ACCC, has been tasked by the Treasurer to monitor the supply chain closely for profiteering, with warnings that misleading statements about price hikes could violate consumer laws.
Anyone been fined yet?
Yeah, there have been fines issued.
In Victoria, new laws under the Fair Fuel Plan require retailers to set and publish the next day prices by 2 p.m, fixing them for a 24-hour period from 6 a.m, with allowances only for reductions, backed by fines of up to $24,000 per breach in order to try and combat the gouging that's going on. This will fix nothing. All it means is that people will know for 24 hours in advance how badly they're going to take it up the arse at the petrol pump. I'm all for preventing price gouging, but putting me in their shoes, how would I plan for the 24-hour period? From a business perspective, realistically, I'd be putting the prices up to the maximum and then reducing them throughout the day depending on demand. It will change nothing aside from what time of the day will be best to fill up.
Hey, what have I told you about giving shitty people bad ideas?
But that's where we're at the moment, folks. This was a little quick and messy, but let me know your thoughts in the comments. As always, stay healthy, wealthy, and wise, and to whoever needs to hear it today, remember you are not a piece of shit. And I will catch you all on the next one. Cheers, peeps.